Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor and today's video is maybe a bit unusual. Recently I watched Abby from Abby of Pelennor. I'll leave her channel linked in the description along with this video. She did a video about her to be read books, talking about her read books and her books that she has to read on her TBR that were read. And I thought that's such a fantastic idea, talking about what books you have on your shelves depending on your colour. And I thought, I'm going to steal that. Sorry, Abby, I didn't ask. But I thought I won't do red because, you know, pick a different colour. And I scoured my shelves, and because I really love my science fiction and fantasy, I have a lot of really dark books, so I don't have very many bright pops of colour that maybe a contemporary or a romance reader would have. But I've settled on a colour that I've pulled out some really unusual books that I haven't talked about on this channel before. And I'm excited to share them with you. I'm not going to go into too much detail for each of these books because this would be a very long video, but if there's any book in particular you want to hear my thoughts on more in depth and I don't have a video already about that book or series, let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to do a video about them. And yeah, I'll just get started and run through them. Hopefully my explanations make sense because a lot of these books are not the first book in the series, so I'll just talk about the series as a whole if that is the case. So the first book I have that's green is The Valley of Silence by Nora Roberts, and this is book 3 in the Circle trilogy. This is a paranormal fantasy series set in Ireland mostly, and follows a whole host of cast of characters who, some are human, some are vampire hunters, some are vampires, and some have magic, and it's all about defeating Lilith. The focal point of this series is romance because it's Nora Roberts. Even her series that heavily focus on plot and storytelling, they aren't just straight up contemporary stories, still have a lot of romance. But yeah, I really enjoy this series, and if you like paranormal fantasy, paranormal romance, and you've not read Nora Roberts before, I feel like this would be a good series to pick up and start with. The first book is called Morrigan's Cross. The next book is A Bone to Pick by Charlaine Harris. I've read a lot of Charlaine Harris's books, but most of the books that I enjoy by her are paranormal fantasy series. They have magic or vampires or some sort of other element to add to the storytelling. But I picked up this series, first one called Real Murders, that are short novellas, that is just straight up like mystery, cosy mystery fiction, I feel like is the term, and I really enjoyed it. It's very dated, very, very dated, and probably quite a lot of problematic things, but as I read Charlaine Harris's writing a lot over the last 10-15 years, I can still pick up and enjoy it, but I maybe wouldn't totally recommend the series unless you're okay with kind of dated concepts. And yeah, for the whole first half of this series, novella series, there's quite a few books because it's short novellas. Yeah, she doesn't even have a mobile phone or anything like that. And yeah, very, very American-centric cozy mystery. But it's good fun for a quick read. Anyway. The next book is Lost Boy by Christina Henry, and I really enjoy this cover. This, if you can't tell, is a Peter Pan retelling, but it's like one you've never read before. This is dark. This is very much a brutal story, and I feel like it takes all the darker aspects and unsaid things in the original Peter Pan fairy tale story and puts words to it. It's very graphic, very dark, very much horror, but it really explains a lot of the origins of Peter Pan in a way that I think makes complete sense, and I really enjoyed it. It's actually a book I'll need to pick up again at some point. It was a couple of years ago I read it now, but I really enjoyed it. If you are interested in a Peter Pan retelling, I feel like this is a really good one. If you like, you know, Lord of the Flies, very, very graphically violent stories, it is very much involving a lot of violence with children, acted upon by other children. So maybe don't pick it up if that bothers you, but yeah, I really thought it was a great version of Peter Pan. Next we have Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Percy Jackson series, and I feel like you've been living under a rock if you've not ever heard of Percy Jackson before, but it is a kind of kids book well, they start off kids books like ages 8 to 12, and then the later books kind of age up to kind of early young adult age range. And it's following Percy Jackson and other demigods, following on from like the Greek myths, and they have different powers and they go on the different kind of Greek myth adventures for various reasons. And I really love this story and this series in general. It's so accessible, I feel like, and I thoroughly enjoyed them even though I came at them as an adult. I did not read these growing up as a child. I picked them up much later on in life, and I still had a great time reading them, and I feel like this would be a fantastic series for an audiobook as well, if that is something that interests you. But yeah, they're great fun. I'm really interested. I think it's a TV series that it's being made into. I'm really excited to see this come to life on TV. Continuing on, I have The Maze Runner by James Dashner. This is the first book in the Maze Runner series, and this is another dystopian young adult series, kind of like the Hunger Games, that was around the same kind of time. And I really enjoyed this. I also read this a lot later on than, you know, the age demographic, but I really enjoyed it, and I still haven't watched the films. I need to get round to that. I'm really bad for watching films in general, let alone adaptations. But yeah, I thought it was a really interesting concept, and thought it was, yeah, a good dystopian series about a kind of virus-y kind of plague comes over and takes over people, and they lock up a load of children in a maze to try and work things out. So you just start off with these kids in a maze and they're trying to escape, and yeah, it's good. I feel like I've said that for all of them. It's good. The next book is The Wicked Will Rise by Daniel Page. Taking a little bit of liberty on this. It's only a little bit of green in the text, but it's got a green spine, so I feel like I'll let that slide because the other predominant colour is black. So this is counting for green. This is the second book in the Dorothy Must Die series, which is a retelling of The Wizard of Oz. And I really enjoyed this series. I have all 4 books. There's also quite a hefty prequel series that I've just decided I'm not interested in reading, but it follows on from Dorothy leaving Oz, and it's kind of a sequel to the original Wizard of Oz story, I believe, timeline wise, and it's following on someone else coming into Oz and seeing the damage that was done, and it kind of follows on from there. And the first book is called Dorothy Must Die, so that lets you know kind of where Dorothy stands. And yeah, I just thought it was actually quite good fun, and I haven't seen too many Wizard of Oz retellings that I've been interested in reading. And I think I picked the first one up on audiobook from my library, and that's how I got into it, and then I saw them all for second hand, bought them all and continued reading them. So I don't know if I maybe would have picked them up in the first place if they weren't in my library, but yeah, I thought they were quite a good Wizard of Oz retelling. The next book is Stormglass by Maria B. Snyder, which is the first book in a trilogy, and I did not realise until years later, probably only a couple of years ago now, that this was more a sequel series to a series called Poison Study, which is 6 books, I want to say. I had no idea about that series. I'd never heard of it. I picked up this book in a kind of trilogy set years and years ago, and I read it and I loved it as a trilogy, and I didn't realise, because it follows a different cast of characters set slightly after that first series, I didn't realise that it was like a kind of companion continuation series following different people. But anyway, I believe, and this was one of my first kind of classic fantasy, high fantasy kind of series that I read that was other than, you know, the stereotypical ones. I think I will do a series review on this trilogy anyway, because now I'm thinking about it, I have a lot to say. But I love this series. I thought the magic systems were so clever, and I need to read Poison Study at some point because I love this world and I love the character Opal, who's the main character, Opal Cowan? Opal Cohen? Oh no. Opal Cowan. I love her character. And I loved integration. So this is a story about a girl called Opal who has very unique magical abilities. She's not quite like all the other magical people at their kind of school, place of study, academy that she is at. She isn't very good at kind of traditional magic. What she can do is focus her magic into glass, and her family are glass blowers for, like, you know, the Citadel, or I can't remember what you call it. It's been a long time since I've read this series. And so she infuses her magic into the glass, and that's kind of her ability, and it's much sought after because she's one of the only ones who can do what she does. So she doesn't have a lot of skill in other senses, but this one ability that she's discovered is very sought after. So she goes off gallivanting on some adventures, and I just think it's a really fantastic fantasy series. And maybe if you're interested in Poison Study, but are interested in the world of Poison Study, but aren't interested in how many books there are, maybe this trilogy would interest you. I'm not sure how much reading this trilogy first spoils you for Poison Study. No idea. I've never read it. I need to though. But yeah, I've rambled a lot. This is going to be a really long video. I'm sorry. I just think the magic and the world building and characters are fantastic. 3 books left, I swear. The next one is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, and this is a classic science fiction story. If you haven't heard of H.G. Wells, you've definitely been living under a rock, or you should have at least seen the films or the BBC TV series adaptation, which was excellent. This is just a classic sci-fi of first contact. Alien species in the form of big metal beings kind of land on the Earth, and it's set in like the early 1900s, and it's the People's Panic in England, predominantly that's where it's set, in England. People's panic of just normal folk kind of wondering what on earth is going on. And yeah, it's a really good sci-fi. I really enjoy H.G. Wells's storytelling ability. Yeah, and it's very different. If you ever watched War of the Worlds, the film, can't remember the name of the people in it, but that's a modern take on this story, because this story is set in like the early 1900s, so they don't have technology or speed of communication or anything like that, or even cars and things, so it's just a very different feel to it. Next we have the children's classic The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. If you haven't read this, you need to. I absolutely love this book, and it's a book that I myself and my sister grew up very familiar with when we were children, having this book read to us and watching the film, the animated film. It's just a lovely, lovely children's story about 3 friends, Ratty, Mole and Badger, and yeah, it's just a lovely classic. And last but by no means least, we have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is one of my favourite classics, and I think was the first classic book I read that I absolutely fell in love with, which has surprised me because a lot of the classic stories I like now are like science fiction, fantasy based. They're kind of the forerunners of that genre at the time, but this is very much just a contemporary story about 4 sisters being sisters, falling in love and being the best that they can be, and their relationship together. And I think it's just a lovely story. I really enjoyed the sisters, and at different stages in my life while reading this book I have kind of connected with different sisters for different reasons, and I think that's what makes it brilliant. Louisa May Alcott was very forward thinking for her time, and was very much for women and girls kind of earning their own money and standing up for themselves, and some of that shows through in this. And yeah, I think it's a really great classic. And the films and the TV adaptations that have come out about Little Women have been good, and I've seen some great ones. So yes, and I also just really love this edition. It's a massive, massive book, but very, very pretty all the same. Oh, I feel a bit out of breath now. So that's all the green books I have on my red shelves. I really enjoyed all these books. I don't really tend to keep books that I didn't enjoy. And the odd one that I do have is for a very specific reason, but in general I get rid of books I don't enjoy. So yeah, let me know in the comments below if there's any books that you have read with green covers, and or even green in the title. Actually, I didn't even check. I don't think I have any books with the word green in the title, but I'd love to hear all those books in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these yourselves, or if there's any that you'd like a video about in particular, or you'd like to hear more about. Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to comment and like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.